Microsoft and its Office 365 is kind of like not kind of like one of the leaders as it goes to company collaboration, communication, things of that nature. So it looks like Office 365 is leaning towards making it easier for people to do remote or to do hybrid because they have released some new features in Office 365 to make it remote friendly. And I didn't put all the features, but one of the things that makes perfect sense, speaking of hybrid, right? And for those who are unfamiliar, hybrid is like you may work work in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Mondays and Fridays you work at home, or you may be 3 days on, 3 days off. So however you do it, you're not 9 to 5, you're not in the office 40 hours a week, right? So one of the cooler features that I saw that made perfect sense was Outlook. They have an RSVP feature. So if you're in Outlook and you like, say me and Nica are having a meeting, right? I create the appointment, and when you make the appointment for the time and the date, there also has a space for location, right? So in the location specifics, you can define or highlight if people are going to join the meeting virtually or in person. Before, you didn't have that option. You just had to,
Type in Teams.
right. If it was a Teams or a Zoom event, you just had to chime in whether you're at your desk at work or at your desk at home. Well, Outlook specifically, you have the option to give somebody the option to say whether they're joining the meeting virtually via over teleconferencing like Teams, or they're actually joining in the meeting office, in the meeting space at the actual location. So there's a bunch of other features, but I just thought that was cool. Speaking of the fact that it's going to take some time for companies to start adopting this whole remote or hybrid work week. I think Microsoft is like, all right, well, we're going to make it easier for people to recognize where you are, whether it be at home or actually in the office. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and one of the things we've had issues just this week, we were talking about before that we start recording the show, is that we had PI planning Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, which is basically all day meetings where you plan out what you're going to do for the next 2 or 3 months. And people flew into our Austin office for these meetings because it's a big deal. So we had people physically in the office. We had people, in Detroit in that office, just all over the place. We're using Teams. People haven't been using those rooms because everybody's been home. We had so many issues with Teams this week with people who are actually in the room. So we have the cameras that kind of follow who's ever talking, and the one touch button where it all pops up and all those things. We would be talking on those of us who were virtual, people in the room, they'd be talking, they can hear us. The call will completely drop. And it's getting back into the rhythm of being in office. The technology ramped up and advanced for being not in the office. It's
At
going to
all.
have to at
100%.
all.
Everybody at home.
Right.
Right.
And so now that people are going back into the office, they are going to have to take a look at the software as well to make sure that it works in the reverse order as well, because, everybody, that was one of our things we put down that, was a struggle for the sprint was Teams. We couldn't get it to work the way we wanted to. So, it's great that they're making it, especially with the virtually accepting, but making it work one way, meaning everyone being not in a centralized location. But now that people are going back to work, they have to be able to make sure that it works both ways and make it easier and less connectivity issues, because this week was nuts. Can you hear us? Can you hear us? We lost you. They're talking over us. Can you hear me? Type in the chat.
Oh,
it
boy.
was pretty, yeah, it was. And it was like all week because we had these meetings from like 9 to 5 all day, Monday, Tuesday,
so
Wednesday.
I can see how a boss or an executive or a CEO like scrub that everybody back in the office,
Right.
because these old, I hate to be ageist, but they ain't got time for all that. It's like, look,
Right.
I'm trying to run this meeting. I'm not trying to fumble around with cameras and mics and conference IDs and logins and muting participants and private messages versus public messages in the chat. And
Hmm.
look, scrub that. Everybody come in the office. So Microsoft looks like it's like, look, it ain't about to be us that y'all about to blame
You
us.
can't blame this on the technology. We got to
Right.
push it so that if there is an issue, it's definitely on the people side because we make sure that our software is top notch. So glad to see that these updates are coming, and hopefully it will be better for us
Right.
who have to use it.
All right, all right. Enough of that. Let's move into some Instagram. I'm a father. I have a of age tweens and teens who are on social media. So Instagram, in response to, in my opinion, in response to a lot of flack that Instagram and Facebook slash Meta as a parent company was getting in, in the wintertime earlier this year about how how kids are being affected by being on social media. Instagram promised some parental controls back in December, and they have finally started to roll those parental controls out to the United States users. So, for example, Instagram lets parents and guardians view and set limits on the amount of time their teens are spending on Instagram. Parents can get updates on which accounts they're following and being followed by, and receive notifications when they report another user. So, like for instance, that last one, like if your kids get a DM and it may be inappropriate, and your kids like, hey, I'm not with this, I don't want to see this, and they report to that user, that will fire off a notification to the parents' Instagram or parents' notification, let them know your kid saw something, somebody sent them something, and they reported it. So um, this is going to make sense to make a lot of parents feel better. Again, you're going to have to sit down and talk to your kids because you're not going to be able to shield them 100%. And you're not going to be able to stop your kids 100% because there are burner accounts that kids use.
Finstas.
Yeah, Finstas. That's where that whole thing came from, fake Instagram, to where they use that and connect that to the parental accounts so the parents feel good, but then they use their real account for the grind, the real deal, right? So
Hmm.
ultimately, you're going to have to talk to your parent or your kids and make sure that your kids are in the right headspace in order to utilize social media and not either fall victim or have enough information to where they're making smart decisions when they're using social media. But it helps that Instagram is making it easier for parents to feel comfortable with letting their kids use social media, if just by a little bit.
So, what I found interesting about this article is for now, it's saying that the teens will have to initiate the supervision feature. So, the teens will actually have to turn it on to allow their parents this access. And later, I guess, when the final version is released in June, parents will have the ability to start the whole supervised whatever, but the teen will still have to approve it. So it's one of those things where I get it. These are humans, they have autonomy, they have the right to their devices and their privacy, all that good stuff. But to me, it kind of defeats the purpose, right? Or not? I'm not a parent, so I'm not
Um,
sure. Or is it
like,
kind of like it can go both ways? You can see where it's beneficial. At the same time, a kid can still open their Finsta if they're trying to do some shady stuff, plan parties, do all that kind of stuff.
look, I was a 14-year-old, and as a 14-year-old, I was doing stuff that I was purposely trying to hide from my parents because I didn't want them to know. So
Right.
I can't sit here as a parent of a 14-year-old and pretend like I'm going to be able to lock down my kids to where they don't want to do the things that I was doing or thinking
The same
about
thing. Right.
when I was their age.
Mhm.
So there's going there that kind of what I say that to kind of piggyback on what you mentioned, that the kids have their own autonomy, They have their own they have their own privacy. You're not going to be able to be there 24/7. I think Instagram probably doesn't want to get into that argument to whether or not kids have a right to privacy.
Mm,
So they're kind of leaving it open to let parents be involved throughout the whole process, right? But also have the kids involved, right?
mm.
Because what I would do is I would take my kid's phone, initiate the process on
Turn it
their
on
phone,
yourself.
and then go on my phone and approve the stuff that I just did, right? Which is
Right.
probably what a lot of parents will do. But that's because one, I have that relationship with my daughter,
With
and
your
we've
children.
had the
Mhm.
conversations to where she feels comfortable knowing that I know
That you're
that she's
watching.
doing things on the internet.
Right.
Now, past that, I'm not, as a result of that conversation, as a result of that relationship, I'm not going to be that person that's sitting on top of them,
Hmm.
hovering over
Why you
everything
like that
they
post?
do.
Yeah.
Right, right, right. Like my father does me, which is weird. I'm 44 years old and
You're grown.
I'll post something on Facebook. He's like, "What you mean by that?" I'm like, "Man, go
Get
on
off.
somewhere." So I don't want to be that parent.
Right.
So, after we go through and I give her my expectations and kind of find out where she is as far as how she operates on social media, sure, I would probably go through and strongly recommend she set these things up, but then kind of ease off and kind of see where things go with the ability to be able to be notified if something that needs to be elevated comes through, right? Then
Right.
I'll decide to act. But a lot of parents don't have those conversations with their parent kids at all. Their kids are running wild, something happens, and instead of the parents saying, "You know what, I should have had the conversation," they'll blame Instagram, they'll blame
Mhm.
Facebook, they'll blame
Try and
Twitter,
sue them.
TikTok,
Yeah.
Snapchat. They'll blame them. So the platforms are like, "Yo, what you're not about to do is blame me because your kids running wild out here. So we're gonna put
I'm
some
not the
stuff in
parent.
place
You're
to
the
make you feel
parent,
good."
and this is your decision how you want to handle it. It's you want to raise your children. We're giving you the opportunity to say this isn't on us. You're raising your children the way you want and how you see
Right.
fit. Yeah.